No, but I mean that picture.
We are people. We need.
The quicker we start, the quicker we finish.
We are on the record.
Okay. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yes. Quotable.
My life is on the record.
So this is a great pleasure. We've already had introductions many times. I asked the mayor if he would say hit a couple points. Number one, he's in a city. He's got rising sea level. Climate change is an issue for him. He's had to deal with COVID in his city, in his population, in a state where the policy coming from the other end of the state hasn't been very friendly in terms of public health, in my opinion. He'll give you his opinion. And he has a gateway city. There isn't a single person in the United States that doesn't know where Miami is. So, gateway city, an up and coming prominent national figure now. Shoot. Okay. Climate, couple of words.
Okay.
Public health,
Okay.
couple of words. Fair game.
So let's start with climate then. Well, climate for us in Miami is not. It's not theoretical. It is existential. We deal with climate events on a regular basis, whether it's storm surge from hurricanes or what we call rain bombs, which are more than usual rain events, or even dry day flooding. Believe it or not, on days that it does not rain, we actually will see water come up from our porous subsoil and pool and pond. So the climate change phenomenon is a very real phenomenon for us. And so our residents did something very unusual in Miami. We actually voted to tax ourselves by a referendum, which was called Miami Forever. And the idea, of course, was we want Miami to be here forever, right? We want it to be here for our children's grandchildren. And so we're probably one of the cities on earth that has dedicated more resources to the concept of being climatically resilient than any other place on the planet. Post 1992, which was Hurricane Andrew, was a 200 mile per hour weather event. We changed all our building codes, and essentially every single building in Miami has hurricane rated windows and is essentially rated for that kind of wind. The new challenge is, of course, water. And particularly with hurricanes, we see storm surge, which can be anywhere from 4 to 6 feet, as it was in Hurricane Irma. But we've also seen events like Dorian, which thankfully did not hit the United States, but was a Category 5 hurricane that sat on top of the Bahamas for 2 consecutive days and produced 15 to 25 foot storm surge. So again, it's not theoretical what Mother Nature can do. So we know the challenges, we know what we have to do, and we're gonna have to invest a significant amount to do it. We're also a C40 city, so we've pledged carbon neutrality. And we have a model where our ecology or our environment is the economy. You know, there's a perception that one is antithetical to the other. You have to choose one or the other, which is often what would happen in the pandemic, during the pandemic. But for us, we think that they're intertwined. We're number 8 in the nation in clean jobs. And so we think there's a tremendous economic opportunity to do things that are sustainable and that save our planet. On the pandemic, most people don't know, or maybe you do, that I was pretty much the first elected official in the country to get COVID. And I got it on March 12th, 2020. And, I didn't know what was going to happen to me. And it was interesting when your mayor is the first person in a big city to get COVID. And I spent 18 days in quarantine. And I think my handling of the pandemic was very much shaped by that reality. I was immediately on the other side of the aisle. When people were afraid of getting COVID, I was the first one to get COVID. And so my challenge was, how do I even get out of quarantine? At the time, it wasn't, there wasn't ubiquitous testing. We didn't know how long COVID impacted you or affected you. So that very much influenced how I dealt with the pandemic. And I always tried to balance the science with the realities that, economically, we have to have a viable economy, and people are suffering, and we knew that government would not be able to solve the problem in the long term. So that was our strategy, and I think we came to a moment which was December 4th of 2020. And on December 4th of 2020, a moment that we had spent 10 years trying to get to, someone put out very innocently a tweet that said, hey, what if we move Silicon Valley to Miami? And I responded very innocently, how can I help? And it was important because it was a lightning in a bottle moment for Miami. We had started to see some of these macro forces conspiring in our favor, the SALT deduction going away, remote work phenomenon, and we needed a catalyst. And we also saw that other cities across America, famously in New York, they kicked out Amazon after winning the HQ2 competition. In San Francisco, one of the elected officials said, F Elon Musk. And he said, message received, and left. And so there was this anti-innovation attitude from cities. And when a mayor responded, how can I help, to the question of moving Silicon Valley to Miami, everyone was shocked. Like, wow, you really want us? Like, this is definitely a counter narrative. And I think what it informed me is that the world is incredibly disruptive. And I'm not so sure that everyone understands how disruptive the world is. It's disruptive to a level that is going to change the way we do just about everything. And it certainly means that cities are not too big to fail. And their success and failure is going to depend on their ability to be dynamic in a ever-evolving environment. And so for us, to go back to sort of the hurricane analogy, or a weather analogy, we saw this tsunami of opportunity coming. And most people, when they see a tsunami, they take cover. They run for cover. And we took out our surfboard and surfed that tsunami of opportunity. And so now, 24 months later, we're number one in the nation in tech job growth. We're number one in the nation in tech job migration. We have migrated over $2 trillion in assets under managed companies to Miami in the last 24 months. Our venture capital pipeline has grown by over 400% year over year. And in the blockchain Web3 space, I know some of you want to talk about crypto, it's over 2,000% increase in venture capital for blockchain-based companies. And our unemployment rate is 1.4%. Our homeless rate is the lowest that it's been since 2013. We were ranked the happiest city in America and the healthiest city in America, and I think that's important. Very cool. It's very cool because we believe in a holistic approach to health and wellness, and really focusing on quality of life. And our, as president now of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, president of all the mayors in the United States, people often ask me, like, how did you do it? How are you doing it? And aside from the macro forces that sort of conspired in our benefit that we took advantage of, I tell people we did it by following 3 simple rules. Rule number 1 is we've kept taxes as low as humanly possible. Okay, so we have I just lowered taxes 2 weeks ago to the lowest rate in recorded history. And my resources have actually doubled. My budget has actually grown 100% since we've started reducing taxes years ago. The second thing we've done is we've kept people safe. I know it sounds very basic, but we're on pace to end the year with the lowest homicide rate since the 1930s in Miami, which at one point was essentially the murder capital of the United States during the cocaine cowboy years. We had, in the 80s, over 300 homicides. Right now, we are almost 3/4 of the year in, and we have 27. So we're on pace to have the lowest homicide rate since the 1930s. And then the third thing we've done is leaning into innovation. going back to the analogy of disruption, if you really care about your residents, you really care about creating prosperity, we believe in Miami, we're fundamentally shaped by our origin story. And that origin story is a story of exile from our country of birth, where a leader there tried to convince everyone, if you just give me all your property and you just give me all your businesses, don't worry, I'll make sure that you're all equal. And in fairness, he delivered. Everybody's equally miserable. So, we're shaped by that. And so when we think about prosperity, we don't think it's a government-driven thing, right? We think that it's about trying to create the most innovative ecosystem that is dynamic enough to understand all the rapid changes that we're seeing and how things are changing, right? And so we obviously went very, very, very much into crypto and Web3 technologies. We just did a big partnership with NFTs, with Time Magazine and Salesforce and MasterCard. So we're incredibly innovative. We've gotten $400 million of investment, $200 million of investment from FTX that named our arena. The founder of FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, told me I had 10 possible deals, 10 possible naming deals, but I picked Miami because you had differentiated yourself. That's $200 million, which, by the way, we put into a gun reduction program in Miami-Dade County. We got the largest Bitcoin conference in the country, 50,000 attendees, tens of millions of dollars in economic development. We took it from LA. And then we've had a number of crypto companies, locating in the city and creating, tens, if not hundreds, of high-paying jobs. So we've been incredibly innovative. That innovation has become our brand. And then like I said, we're number one in tech job migration. So we've started to attract the best talent from across the world. And so it's an exciting time. There is what I call a FlyMo effect in Miami now, which is a combination of a flywheel effect and fear of missing out combined. FOMO and FlyMo, so I call it FlyMo. And that's what's happening. And so I'm sure many of you recently saw that Andreessen Horowitz opened an office in Miami, and Ken Griffin moved Citadel Miami, and Orlando Bravo came from Thoma Bravo, and Steve Schwartzman opened a massive Blackstone office in Miami that's grown by 400% since he got there, and McKinsey's grown by 400%, and all these major law firms, including the one that I belong to, moved and opened an office in Miami. So it's just an exciting time. But like I've said, I really believe that the principles that have made Miami successful are scalable. 85% of the population of America is in American cities. 91% of the GDP produced by this country is in American cities. And so if we just follow those rules, I think we're going to usher in a generation of prosperity, not just for ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren, because it's a quad-generational event that we're going through right now as we're transitioning from an industrial to a digital economy. And those kinds of events happen every 3 or 4 generations. So it's extremely disruptive, and you combine that with a change from the boomer generation to our generation to this generation, it's a double disruption. And so the cities that are prepared for that lean into it, are the ones that are going to see the benefits, and the ones that don't are going to suffer the consequences. And we're starting to see that in terms of the sort of major statistics that I've talked about, the KPIs, right, that I've talked about in Miami. When you ask for those same KPIs in cities, which I won't mention, you know that the numbers are not going in that direction. The trends are not going in that direction. So we call it the Miami Miracle. Because if you would have told me on December 3rd, 2020, that this was all going to happen, I would have told you to, go to a mental institution or something. Because it just didn't seem plausible to me. But we did spend 10 years creating the conditions for that December 4th moment. And we did it by creating a large tech conference. We did it by seeding incubators and accelerators, and creating the ecosystem and teaching our community how to scale. Because we had a very strong small business community, but they had just never tasted scale. And so I think that's what's happening now. And I believe that we are going to be what I call the capital of capital. And in this new world where jobs are decentralized, What will be important is where capital decisions are made and where capital is aggregated. And I think the fact that we are geo-positioned in the middle of 5 mega markets, New York, Silicon Valley, South America, the Middle East, and Europe, perfectly positions us to take advantage of that proximity in this new evolving world.
Q&A?
Yeah, of course.
Can you repeat the 3 rules?
Keep taxes low, keep people safe, lean into innovation. It's not rocket science.
Simple.
Yeah. By the way, it's simple, but it's hard for many cities to do. Right? It's a simple thing, but it takes a ton of political courage. Right? Do you want me to?
You can. Jamie was
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
You mentioned safety as
Yeah.
one of your pivotal focuses.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about the innovative program between police and mental health professionals
Yes.
that's taking place in Miami? Because it is one of the finest stories I've heard in America.
We've done so much in the space of mental health, of mediation. We take a very holistic approach, and police officers have the hardest job in America right now. Imagine, I'm on the record now, but imagine if everything that you did all the time, whenever you're at work, is recorded and then played back and then scrutinized after the fact. It's a very difficult thing. But what we're doing in the mental health space with Judge Leifman is we're opening up a major center in December, which will have 200 beds for people who are transitioning out of the correctional system to make sure that they have the services necessary to integrate back into society. And that's part of our, what I call functional zero plan. We want to be the first major urban city in America to have 0 homeless. We have right now 510. And we're the lowest level since 2013. So we're getting there, but it is a comprehensive approach.
Don't you have a unique, though, technique between the police and mental health professionals in their interactions with people on the street?
Yes.
So that folks are not diverted to the criminal justice system, but instead get mental health
Yes.
support?
Yes, we do. We do. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
training other cities in this.
We are. Yep. It's first of its kind. We also do a lot with not just mental health, but we also do it with disabled as well. So that, because again, that's where unnecessary confrontations can arise.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a remarkable story, and
Yeah.
it's being translated up in the Northeast.
That's great. It's great to hear.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yahoo Finance.
Well, since I'm a working journalist, I guess it's my job to try to get you to say something scandalous about DeSantis.
Goodness. That's,
I talked with you last night, and I don't think you're that stupid.
no, I don't think that's likely to happen.
So feel free, but
Okay.
so my serious question is, where do you fit into any political party? You're not talking like a Republican, the way we understand Republicans in the Trump era. And you're definitely not talking like a Democrat. There is this startup effort, Andrew Yang and
Yeah.
Christy Whitman, and to form a third party.
Yeah.
Can you fit in the Republican Party? Do you want to reform the Republican Party? Is there room for a third party? What's the deal?
You know,
But feel free to say something about Trump.
yeah. I'll pass on that. But I'll say this, and at the risk of sounding somewhat naive, I'll say that I can only be who I am, right? And who I am is someone who, grew up in the 80s, and I admired Ronald Reagan, who to me, made it very evident who the good guy was and who the bad guy was, and made you feel good about being an American. I think we've lost a lot of that. And I think that's part of what needs to be restored. I also think politics is a pendulum and it's an evolution. I've been around it since I was 2 years old. I did my first political commercial when I was 2. I looked right into a camera and I said, "Vota por papi, por favor," when I was 2. It was my dad's.
How much gringos out there?
Vote for my dad, please. Vote for my dad, please, which was my dad's first campaign in 1979. I was sitting on his lap. And the question, in a sense, is asking about the current Republican Party or the current state of affairs. And
Let me make it a little narrower. So you're ambitious.
okay, you're already asking a follow-up before I get to answer the first question.
So David said scrum. This is a scrum.
Yeah, okay.
You need to work within a party if you're going to.
Sure.
You
That's
need
true.
to do what is necessary to get funding from within that party.
Yeah.
They have two, and they both suck.
Yeah, so so I think what I was saying was that your point of reference is this moment, and it's understandable because in this moment, what is succeeding is division, right? And I think that's the kryptonite of democracy. And so, for me, my view is the success that we've had in Miami should be a predicate and should be something that people look at and say, wait a second, what's going on here? What's different? How does a Republican mayor in a Democratic city get elected by 86% and reelected by 80%? Right? What's going on here? And I think that's why I've been traveling the United States and really the world evangelizing the Miami story, because the Miami story sets a different narrative for a future of this country, right? A positive future. We don't always have to be fighting with each other. We don't always have to focus on the things that we don't agree with, you know? And I think that there is room, regardless of party, for someone who can inspire you, for someone who's positive, and someone who has a vision for the future that's not only going to help you, but it's going to help, more importantly, your children and your grandchildren. And I think that's what people deep down really, really want to hear. They're not getting it. They're not getting it. But the absence of something doesn't mean that when you have something, that won't be a clear choice, if that makes any sense.
To follow up on the security question,
I'll go boom, boom, boom.
if you had the mayor of Chicago, New York, San Francisco, Seattle,
Philadelphia,
Philly, what advice
Washington.
would you give them on the security situation?
I give them a
and
few.
relationship with police.
I would give them a few pieces of advice. I'm very pro-police. I think you have to support your police, number one. Number two, the nonsense of defunding police. Not even Democrats believe that. The President of the United States, I was giving a speech on a Wednesday in January, and the President came after me on Friday and said the exact same thing about defunding police. So I would say, do not defund your police. I would say to them, hopefully you don't have a DA that doesn't want to prosecute what people consider to be petty crime, because lawlessness has broad repercussions. And when I was talking recently with the CEO of a major company who suffers $3.5 billion in losses from theft. Think about what their revenue is, right? $3.5 billion in losses from theft. So if you're in a city and CVS pulls out, Walgreens pulls out, or anybody pulls out, who are the ones that suffer? Everybody suffers. So what happens is you want to be compassionate for people that are struggling and they're stealing, right? But at the same time, it's very similar to the homeless situation. You want to be compassionate with the homeless, without a doubt. But they also impact the rest of your citizens, right? And so when you have 30, 40, 50, 60,000 homeless in a city, it impacts the rest of the city, it impacts their quality of life. So I would say, hopefully they don't have a DA like that, but if they do everything in their power to change that. I would also say that there are other things that influence crime, right? Like the fact that we have a 1.4% unemployment rate, I think is a massive influencer over our homicide rate. We have a poverty initiative, which is essentially like, it's actually really cool. It's almost like a venture capital fund where we get ideas from people, innovative ideas from people, how to reduce poverty, and then we fund them. Oftentimes we seed the company, right? We seed the idea. And then hopefully they get funding and perpetuate themselves. So we've been comprehensive in our approach, and there are other things that we do on the mental health side. There are things that we do, obviously with the disabled, to try to avoid unnecessary confrontations that don't create, worse situations or distrusts. But it's really not that hard. You just have to, you have to have a backbone. Yeah. I think I went there, and then you.
Okay, so you started by talking about one of your core principles is keeping taxes low.
Yeah.
What taxes are you talking about, and how does keeping taxes low square with the realities of a city that's growing in population, along with a part of America, southern Florida, that's growing in population, with all the implied demands on government services that that a growing population requires. How do you make that work?
So the only tax that we charge is a property tax. And it's a rate. It's called the millage rate. And we lowered that rate to the lowest level in recorded history. So two things. One is the more we've lowered taxes, the more revenue we've generated. So it's counterintuitive.
So it's sort of supply side kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
And number two, last year we grew the second most in recorded history. So we grew by 12% just last year. We had 80 million in new revenue. So in 1 year on $1 billion budget. So you don't have to raise taxes to generate more resources. You know, you have to create the conditions for growth, which generate more resources for the municipality. We've done it.
Yeah, would you become mayor of New York, please?
Yeah, that's the first thing I'd recommend is a lower taxes.
I want to ask you about Miami Forever. You guys obviously have a tremendous climate exposure.
Yeah.
How much can a mayor do to protect the city against what is clearly an issue that's global? And here in the United States, we have one of the major parties that doesn't really believe that it's that much of a threat, or at least that seems to be the general sense.
I'll let you debate.
That's your party.
I'll let you debate Carlos on that one, which is what Carlos spends a lot of his time on is creating climate consensus among Republicans. He's a leader in that.
Can you change that party towards a more protective view of coastal cities like Miami?
I think this is also a generational thing, right? I mean, if you talk to my generation or the next generation, millennials or Generation Z, it's their number one issue. It's their number one issue. So I think just like we're seeing Hispanics trend Republican, I think as you see the next generation of Republicans, this is becoming a bigger priority. And then I think the second thing is that there's a convergence of the environment with economics, which has not always been there. And I think that that convergence is helping make the case for itself. Right? It's depoliticizing it in many ways, my opinion. I don't know if there was another question on Miami Forever in there.
Well, it was how do you, running a city, protect the city going forward from...
So we're about to make a major announcement. So, spoiler alert, right? Which is that FEMA has just downgraded our risk profile, which means that every single flood insurance owner in Miami is going to save an additional 15 to 20% on their premiums. So this idea that Miami is becoming riskier is actually false.
What's the basis for FEMA's action?
What's the basis for it? The hundreds of millions of dollars that we spend in upgrading our infrastructure.
So it's the precautions you've built into
Correct.
your infrastructure.
That's right. Right. We have not changed the temperature of the earth. Yes. Yes. Yes.
I think politicians have gotten this kind of black eye for being so short-term in nature. So my question to you is, how do we get politicians to do what's right economically in the long term, even though it may be unpopular politically short term?
No, I think that will happen also with this generational turning of the page. I think when you're at the end of a generation, the generational actors have a tendency to be more short term because they have less time on earth, right? What I took over for a boomer as mayor. And all those KPIs that I talked about, I mean, I honestly believe would not have happened if I wasn't a young mayor and aggressive and energetic and had a vision, right? If I wasn't pushing the envelope, it wouldn't happen. I care about those things. I obsess over those things. I think about gunfire detection systems, which we have one. So I know with GPS precision, whenever a gun is fired, instantly in my city. And then we have CCT cameras that pan to the area. So we've caught serial killers of homeless with shot spotter alert, right? And CCT camera that actually videotaped the incident and saw the license plate. And then we got the person's cell phone that pinged at that precise spot. And we ran the license plate, went to his work, and he had the gun. in his, thing, and then we match the bullet to the, ballistics to the, so, I mean, with technology, it's incredible. And technology is just going to become a better solver of problems as time goes on. It's something we're going to have to get used to. But I do think that, I think that if you look at the world, so let's just zoom out for a second, forget about the US or Miami. If you look at the world is getting younger from a leadership perspective, and that leadership has a vision. And if the United States does not understand that, then we're no different than some of the cities that are not understanding what's happening in Miami. Because our supremacy is not guaranteed. It's something we have to work for, and it's something that we're going to have to be strategic about. Let me go with him and then him, because you already asked one, so go ahead.
A short question, a long question. Do you still accept your salary in Bitcoin?
I do.
You do? And
yeah, my mayoral salary, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been going up lately.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good.
You've talked about generational differences.
Mm-hmm.
You've talked about that the world's getting younger. It doesn't seem like that in the United States. It seems like we've got some very old politicians in the United States. Why do you think we do? Why do you think we're not moving on to the next generation of politicians?
Democracy. I think part of it is my generation, so I'll take the heat a little bit. I think my generation, I feel like I'm an accident. I think I told some of you this. My father was the first Cuban mayor of Miami. He was elected in 1985. I'm the first Miami-born mayor in the 125-year history of the city, and we're the first father and son. But I can honestly say that, but for me being his son, I'm not sure that I would have ever run for office. And so I think a lot of people in my generation said, that politics thing, let's just leave it for somebody else. And I think the last generation has stayed in power and filled that void. I still have people on my council, and I would say respectfully, that were elected officials in the 1980s in Miami. Okay, so this is 40 years later, and they're still elected officials. So they're filling a vacuum that has been left by a generation that has taken a pass to make money, right, or to be successful. And I think that our country suffered as a result, but I also think it's democracy, right? We have a choice. Who are we going to choose? Are we going to have a redux of 2020? Is that what's going to happen in 2024? Or are we as a community, as a country, going to say, no, wait a second. We need somebody positive. We need somebody generational. We need someone that understands this difference between an industrial and a digital economy and is going to help the U.S. be competitive in that landscape. And we need somebody, frankly, that can speak to the minority community of this country, which is up for grabs, right? And that's the question we have to ask ourselves, and that's the question we have to answer in 2024. I'll go back to you. I'm going to go him, and then you.
You've been talking a lot about the causes of inflation nowadays. One of them is the cost of labor.
Yeah.
In this country right now, we have an incredibly low unemployment rate and also low labor force participation rate.
Yep.
And we're trying to bring demand down by raising interest rates. So we're trying to slow the economy down.
Yeah.
Is immigration an answer or a partial answer to this?
Sure, of course it is.
What's your policy? How would you implement that?
So let me zoom out again, take a little bit of a step back and say, one of the things that wasn't discussed yesterday was, deficit spending, right? We talked a lot about the supply chain, and we talked about monetary policy, but we didn't talk about fiscal policy, right? So you have right now, not on the street, half of the ARPA bill, right, American Rescue Plan, which is $950 billion undelivered, right, because we're the recipients, that's why I know it's undelivered, right? So we've allocated the first 950, probably haven't spent it all, but we've allocated it all. The next 950 we have not received yet. So that's 950 billion that's not on the street, plus the $1 trillion from the infrastructure bill, zero's on the street as far as I know, zero. So when you talk about demand, you're talking about 950 billion, 1.2 trillion, that's 2.1, plus 400 or 500 billion that they just spent. So that's, $2.5 approximately trillion dollars that's not in the economy. So that's the first issue. On the labor issue, I do think that immigration should be looked at as an economic issue instead of the way that it's being looked at now, right? You've got 20 million people that are undocumented in this country, and all the polls show that everyone agrees that you can't identify them, you can't find them, and you can't get them out. So there has to be a solution to that. And then when we debate about the border and keeping people out and keeping people in, the U.S. has the same problem as, not the exact same problem, but a similar problem to China, is that we have a declining birth rate in addition to the labor shortages that we have now. So something's got to give, right? And we're living in an economy where jobs are going to come back to the U.S. if we're smart, because these industrial jobs are going to be done in a more automated fashion, right? And the digital jobs are the ones that they're going to require a certain skill level. I was in a, this is an interesting story. I'm sure none of you have ever been to Marble, North Carolina. If anybody here has been to Marble, North Carolina, I'll buy you dinner. No? Okay. The next dinner. Marble, North Carolina is fascinating to me because Marble, North Carolina, the entire population of Marble, North Carolina, centered around a manufacturing facility that manufactured the strings that went in Levi's jeans, right? The population of Marble was 40,000. I'm coming to you, by the way. So when all those jobs left to China, because they could be done cheaper in China, the population of Marble, North Carolina went from 40,000 to 400. Okay? You know what that manufacturing facility is today? It's a Bitcoin mining facility. It's a Bitcoin mining facility that uses 70% hydro power and offsets the remainder with carbon offsets. So it's carbon neutral, and it's a Bitcoin and it has now created a technological, high-paying, skilled job workforce in Marble, North Carolina, and is bringing the town back. So those jobs are available. China banned Bitcoin. Russia banned Bitcoin. We should never agree with Russia and China on anything, particularly not on an innovation like that. So, I think there are massive opportunities if we're smart, but we've got to get out of this rut that we're in. And the only way we're going to get out of this rut is if we decide to get out of this rut. So I'll go back to you, right?
Well, I reiterate my invitation to
okay, I got it.
Trump and DeSantis.
Got it.
But I'll ask another question. You identify as a millennial?
No, I'm actually, I think technically a Generation X.
Gen X.
Yes. I don't identify as any. I identify as a human being, a man. I identify as a.
We talked about generation.
My pronoun is he. I don't know.
Are you watching Stranger Things?
I'm not actually watching Stranger Things.
And name 3 favorite bands.
Bands?
Yeah.
Okay, what do I watch? I watch whatever my wife tells me to watch.
Well, like what?
Let's see. No.
Bachelor?
I've watched The Bachelor.
Ozark?
Guilty.
Ozark?
I've watched Ozark. Very good show. Breaking Bad, Ozark, very good. Genre. I've watched Games of Thrones. Which one?
Yellowstone?
I've watched Yellowstone. Actually, my wife tried to get me to watch 1883. Yeah, I didn't like it too much. I couldn't stay. I know. She loved it, but What's that? Bands, music. I like. Let's see. Right now, I'm listening to I just downloaded Electronics 80s, which are really good, like workout music. I like electronic music too. I like EDM. I like Cuban music, like Spanish music to dance to. Yeah. 440. Yeah, I like Gloria and Emilio. 440. Yeah. What else? I'm reading the Walter Isaacson book on Einstein right now. It's a really good book. If you haven't read it, it's phenomenal. He's a great author. The one on Steve Jobs was incredible, and I want to read the one on Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah, I'll do a follow-up and listen to the reason.
Okay, go ahead.
You talked about growth.
Yeah.
I wonder what you think are the keys to growth. Miami has seen an influx of people because of adverse tax situations and other.
That's a big part of it, yeah.
That's been helpful.
Super helpful.
What's organic in Miami from a growth perspective?
Well, I think we also, it was not just the taxes, which I think were a big part of it, but I think the fact that we were welcoming. We're very diverse, and I don't mean just diverse ethnically, but we're very diverse politically. I think a lot of people were fleeing places where they felt that there was a monolith on intellectual thought. And I think they feel much more liberated in Miami to have a difference of opinion. which is what fundamentally we should feel in the US, right? A lot of these issues are hard, but they don't necessarily have to be issues that create so much hate. There's a difference between disagreeing and disliking somebody. And I think that line has been blurred. Like, everybody that disagrees with you dislikes you. It doesn't make any sense. You can feel passionately about an issue on two contrary sides. And by the way, they can be justified, right, by your belief system. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we're just two different people. We grew up differently. We have different influences. We don't agree. It's not a big deal. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make me a bad person. But our politics have become toxic. So in Miami, I think this confluence of capital, of getting the PEs and the hedge funds coming with the VCs, has created a new capital stack, if you will, capital ability to build companies. So we're building a ton of unicorns. I mean, a lot of stuff in the technology space, and we're trying to spike the ball by doing some partnerships with some major universities that hopefully we'll be announcing in the next 24 months. That'll put us on the educational map as well. You go to this young lady back there.
Thank you for that, young lady. Thank you.
3 sisters, a mother, a wife, and a daughter. So, no brothers.
I'm listening to you. I like everything you say. I want to vote for you. But tell me what makes you align with the Republican Party today.
Well, I believe in limited government. I don't believe that government is a solver of all problems. I believe in a strong national defense. I think that our country has been a force for good around the world. And so, I mean, those are some of the things that I believe in. I mean, I think I don't hyper obsess over the labels, I guess, is my view of life. And I know, to his point, that's maybe a little Pollyanna-ish, maybe a little naive, but I don't obsess over the labels. I think the problem with our modern day politic is that people want to label somebody. They put an R next to your name, a D. You must think this way on everything. You must think that way on everything. And to me, it's a false dichotomy, right? We're not that simple as human beings. But this is a structure that exists, and until it changes, it's going to be the structure that we have to deal with. And you have to work within that structure.
When you became a sort of a booster, one of the leading kind of political boosters of the crypto economy, did you go in with clear eyes about just how volatile that marketplace is? And has anything happened in the last 3 or 4 months that's caused you to even question the crypto market? I mean, have you been surprised by how drastically sharp the drop has been in crypto assets?
So the answer is I have not been surprised by how sharp the drop has been, because it depends on your point of reference, right? For most people, it depends on when you started following crypto, right? Let me unpack that a little bit for you. So last year, for most people, I call it the year of mainstreaming, which is basically when most people understood that crypto sort of existed and this is what it was. That was a very, very high year for Bitcoin, for example. And if that's your point of reference, then it's not a good point of reference, right? But if you were in Bitcoin 10 years ago and you got it at $100 and it's at 23,000, right? From your point of reference, it is phenomenal. When you think of Bitcoin, just using Bitcoin as an example, as the most, I think I'm going to say this right, the most appreciating asset in the history of assets. That's context. So I think a lot of the conversation around cryptocurrencies lacks context. In that sense, I think it also lacks context in terms of its newness, right? Do you remember Netscape? Right? We don't use Netscape anymore, right? But nobody's complaining about the fact that the internet we use every single day, every single minute. Right, so there are going to be companies that are not going to make it. That's part of the evolution of any technology. So it's not to me a shock that some companies are going to survive, some companies are going to have great products, but bad business practices are going to go under. What I think is actually interesting about this moment, I compare it to the 08-09 financial crisis, and what's different is nobody bailed out the crypto industry. Right? So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out And I think what we're seeing is the companies that are bailing out crypto companies are other crypto companies, right? And the strong will survive and the weak will not, and the ones that are not, that are poor. And I think it's going to reinforce good business practices. But it didn't come at a cost of, a bunch of taxpayer money. And I also think, I have a lot of thoughts on this, obviously. I think I'm not surprised at the volatility of crypto because one of its benefits is its liquidity, right? So people who may have been putting their money in crypto for one reason, now when you have interest rates going up, you have the economy going down, they decide they want to shift into a different asset class. It's like having cash, right? It's easy to get out of it. So if you're focused on crypto, or if you get into crypto because of the price, maybe that's something that I wouldn't necessarily recommend, right? I don't look at crypto as Bitcoin in particular as a store of value per se. I look at it as a mechanism of exchange that will become more pervasive and that has a possibility of disrupting some major financial systems.
In your messaging about crypto to your constituents, do you think you're providing enough of the caveats, enough of the downside concerns that people should be thinking about?
That's another fine line, right? So, I had a FaceTime or Zoom or whatever with Chairman Gensler on this issue, okay? And his viewpoint is protectionist, right? And the contrary is you're protecting people from themselves, right? You're protecting, you're disrupting their ability to create wealth for themselves, right? You can't invest in private markets.
You're just giving healthy warnings.
Yeah, I mean,
not a bad thing.
No, I don't think it's a bad thing. And listen, nobody wants to see fraud or anyone defrauded, right? But again, there's also a difference between fraud and taking risk. And I think what's happened also in the course of this country is we have made it harder for people to take risk, and then we wonder why there's so much income inequality. Right, because if only the wealthy people can invest in private equity, markets, and those are the markets that are growing the fastest, then why aren't the poor people in the world able to access those markets, right? So, general, go ahead.
Yeah,
he's the general. I mean, he's a general. How can I?
I'd like to talk education from a
Sure.
state where parental rights are a huge discussion area.
Yep.
Pornography in school, libraries, that kind of good stuff.
Yep.
CRT. Could you address that, what you're doing in Miami as far as your school superintendent, what you're doing in your school system?
I think that comes down to two different things. I think, look, I think everybody agrees that parents should be the one that teach their kids about sexuality, right? I have an 8-year-old and I have a 4-year-old, and I don't want anyone, not a public school teacher, not a police officer, I don't want anyone teaching my children about sexuality. It's a very difficult subject, very delicate subject, and I think, school should be out of that business. And I don't know if there's more to say to it than that. I just don't think it's what school should be in the business of doing.
You don't think schools should teach sex education at all?
I didn't get taught sex education at school. I turned out okay. So, I mean.
But what about the others who don't? Don't people here in high school have kids?
I mean, look, I didn't get taught sex education. If in high school, maybe someone who's an adult or close to being an adult, but I don't think you should teach a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old. You know what I mean? I don't want my 3-year-old or 5-year-old being taught that. Maybe when you're in high school and you're more age appropriate to be, to talk about things like that. But I still don't understand why that can't be taught at home. As a parent, I think you have an obligation to teach your kids and talk to your kids about some of these issues.
What about parents who feel that obligation?
The parents sometimes do fail in that obligation.
As a public health society, we have to deal with the outcomes of the
Sure. Yeah, no, I hear you.
So it's a public health issue, or is it not?
I mean, it depends on who you're asking, I guess. Right?
How can you interest the teachers to teach your kids about, education and all that, but not that part of it? Because it's a very important part of, how you go and live your life.
Well, let me ask you this question: government is it for us, or is government like some separate entity, right? I mean, if we agree as a society that kids should be taught sexual education in high school, I don't think that there'll be, broad disagreement on that issue. But I think where it gets controversial is when they're 3 years old, or 4 years old, or 5 years old, because I don't think it's appropriate. So, I mean, that's my personal opinion. Again, we can have differences of opinion, and you're entitled to have your opinion. It's perfectly fine. I have my opinion, and that's how I feel about it, So.
I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
I'm not sure we are.
Boomer? Yeah,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
it seems like something's off here.
Yeah.
In the 5th grade, they taught us, boys and girls, how babies were made. It was
Right.
very easily put together.
I never had a class like that.
I never did either.
Biology in high school.
Really? I had it in 5th or 6th grade, but it was old film.
Yeah.
It was in Wayland, Massachusetts, when I moved there.
Yeah.
That is what I saw. But it didn't get into, it was very basic, it was maybe 40 minutes,
Yeah.
and that was it.
Yeah, look, respectfully, I think we're falling into the trap.
Yeah.
that's my point, which is there are things that are emotionally divisive, that are not, let's put it this way, I wouldn't be spending my energy and time particularly on this issue. I wouldn't. Like, I don't think it's a problem. I think it's a bit of a manufactured issue.
You can't solve everything, you've got to pick your battles.
No, and I just think, again, I think it's a bit manufactured.
Okay. You stepped on that landmine immediately.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. No, clearly.
So going back to crypto just for a second. Just
Yeah.
help me out here. I know, well.
I'm starting to sweat.
Yeah. You'll feel better with this.
Yeah, no, I'm going to smoke a cigar soon.
So Miami's become kind of like an epicenter for the crypto industry. You've got conferences there. A lot of millionaires have moved to Miami because of the crypto industry.
Yeah.
They've set up shop in Miami because of the crypto industry. So just to give us some context, how much is the crypto industry contributing, has it contributed to the Miami success story? What would the Miami success story be like without the crypto industry?
I think it's a part of it. I don't think it's a huge part of it, but I think it's a part of it because I think part of it is our rebranding, right? And our rebranding, we're branding ourselves as a city of innovation. And that's part of it. I mean, I think when you think about what do engineers want to be working on, they're increasingly going into the Web3 world. So to brand yourself as a Web3 city, I think is something that puts you in the forefront of the next generation of technology. So I think, but I don't think, I mean, it's not like a huge part of our ecosystem. We've grown, like I said, our venture capital in that space has grown 2,000% in 1 year. So the brand is working. We're creating a ton of jobs. Even in the crypto winter, it hasn't been problematic to our economy that, there's been a slowdown.
So clearly you have a good grasp of technology and sort of springboarding off the crypto thing, and you obviously think broader than just Miami.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts on a central bank digital currency? And if you
do,
what do you think are the pros, and also if you would address the cons?
So the pros are the speed of transaction, right? I think is one of the biggest pros. Sending wires takes forever. The processing of what's that?
He's got a great story you need to hear.
Yeah, I mean,
Wells Fargo.
So I think that's a big. I think the cons are that it doesn't get you out of the system that creates a lot of the problems that people who created Bitcoin are trying to avoid, right? And we saw it, right? You're spending too much money, then you're trying to raise interest rates to counteract the excessive spending, and you're like in the seesaw trying to control demand and supply, and is that really healthy? Or is it healthier for the market to sort of, have its own ups and downs, and that's part of life, and
Do you think we'll have one? A central bank digital?
It's hard to say because I don't think the current administration will do it. Although there's been steps, both administrations have taken steps towards it. Obviously China is doing that because they want to depower Bitcoin. I think governments will ultimately do it because I think they see the benefits and they want to try to avoid an inevitability in terms of losing their currency, and it can really happen. I think it's really possible. And if it happens, it's going to be depowering governments significantly across the world. Yeah, I think it has. I think, being off a digital currency, off a fiat, right, has the ability to make governments more disciplined in terms of how they borrow money and basically create money. It also can disrupt, because of the point-to-point, can disrupt communist dictatorships that try to control the money supply and who gets it and how they get it.
You're terrific.
Oh, thank you. Look, I look at it as I only stepped on one landmine. I mean, that's not bad, What's that? What's that, 4? Did you say 4? Oh, there's more coming.
You're leaving us tomorrow morning.
Yes.
Did you catch any fish today?
Yes, I did, actually. Both in the morning and in the afternoon. So awesome. Thank you, guys.
And a few in this room, I think.
Yeah, I hope so.